Alright guys, let's hop into it. What do you do after you finish the Diablo 4 campaign, and specifically once you're at about level 50, kind of what to do. Now, when you finish the campaign, people can be all over the place in terms of their level, but the very first thing that you really want to do is try to reach World Tier 3. You can see over here we are on World Tier 4. The reason why you want to reach this ASAP is because certain items will not drop in the game no matter how long you play. You will never get a unique item unless you are playing on World Tier 3 or World Tier 4, and certain items in the game will be more powerful. You'll start to get these things once you get to World Tier 3 called sacred items, and eventually you'll get these things called ancestral. Ancestral are kind of the most powerful items in the game, and specifically once the item reaches 725 item power, it will be the best in slot in terms of like what's the maximum amount of like dexterity that it can roll, what's the maximum amount of whatever stat that you want can roll on the item. So 725 is your goal in terms of itemization in your items. So starting right off, you want to go ahead and do the world cap. So I have a video that goes over the full guide over how to do this, and again, I mentioned it in the video. You need to go here to do your sacred items and your unique items to actually drop. So starting right off, to access this, you want to go on to World Tier 2. It's going to be over here. That's kind of like your very first goal once you get to the end game. That is your main goal. Again, the reason why is because all the items that you acquired, they're not going to be sacred when you're playing on World Tier 1 and 2. Sacred items are essentially ancient items if you've played Diablo 3. And then going further, the ancestral items are basically a higher version of it. It's not like a primal, it's actually a stronger version of a sacred. So it's basically an item that has a higher item power. So it doesn't really matter too much on the stats because the damage is just going to be way higher. So your whole goal in terms of progression and the end game is to get the items to have a very specific item power. Again, you're going to have to go to the higher world tiers to actually access this. But what do you do in terms of like the actual event? So when you get to the end game, you'll be able to have this thing called the Grim Favors and the Tree of Whispers. So what you can do is you can venture out, and certain objectives on the map will give us certain grim favors. When we complete all of them, we can take them to the Tree of Whispers and it will give us a reward, and I'll show you guys kind of what that reward looks like. So here's what the reward looks like. So once you complete all 10, you go to the Tree of Whispers, you talk to him, he's gonna ask, what do you want for your reward? So these are basically like bounties if you play Diablo 3. You get to choose what you want. Maybe your helmet really sucks, maybe your boots really suck, and sometimes you'll see that there is a greater cache of whatever. So usually if you do see those, grab those instead. It's gonna give you some better results. So all you do is you choose the one that you want and you open it up, and it has a very high chance for a legendary. Legendaries aren't actually the be-all end-all. You definitely want to look at sacred and ancestral yellow items as you progress in the world tier. So you basically get this cache, you open it up, and again, it's a very high chance for legendary. So it is a part of the end game progression, as it does have some recipes, and it will eventually, once you get to world tier 3, drop what are called sigils. So these sigils are consumables that you can actually activate, and what it's going to allow you to do is do what's a nightmare dungeon. This is part of your progression. It adds a modifier to the dungeon to make it more difficult, and sometimes it does make it easier. So the green ones are easy mods, and the rest of the mods are usually just going to be like some sort of like negative modifier, making it harder. If you played any game like Path of Exile, Torchlight, any sort of end game for action RPGs, it's like their variant of maps. So you activate it and you go and just basically do the map. So where do you get these sigils? So you have to get to World Tier 3 in order for this to actually happen. One thing I really suggest for people to do is you can try that at World Stone Cap. Again, there's a full guide, and I will pin it down below, that shows exactly how to do it. You can do it at any level. It doesn't have like a gate on like what level you can actually open up the gate and try to do it. So I would say try to do it. If you fail, it's fine. It's no big deal. You don't really lose out on anything. Try to do the World Stone Cap, and there's another one eventually where you have to fight like another uber boss fight at the very end. But try to do it as soon as you can. Like literally as soon as you finish the campaign, just try it. And the reason why, again, you want to try it is because those items simply won't drop until you get to the next world tier. So do that. Now, in between that, let's say like you're like, oh, okay, man, couldn't do it. I was too low level. If you're level 50, you should be able to do it automatically. There's like no reason why you can't do it. I think I did mine at like 40, but you can do this pretty much whenever you want to. So try to do it. If you do it with a group, hey, that makes things easier. The next thing I want to go ahead and mention is like the Paragon board. And so one thing that's kind of related to the Paragon board is once you reach level 50, because a lot of people have been asking, what do I do at the end game once I reach, again, like level 50? I already am on World Tier 3. So again, your first goal is to get to World Tier 3. So what you can do while you're doing the progression is just try to gain levels. Where are the best places to level? Currently, again, things will get updated as time progresses. You see, I have all of the Lilith statues in this whole region. Collecting Lilith statues is pretty good once you reach level 50, but there are special Lilith statues that I want to mention for the Paragon points, and I'll link a Paragon guide if you guys want to check check that out as well because it's part of the endgame progression. Not all of the Lilith statues are equal. There are very specific ones that are in red. So if I go ahead and open up like another tab of this interactive map, you'll see that there are red Lilith statues. Once you hit level 50, collect all of the red Lilith statues. The reason why is they give us a Paragon point. It's different than the ones that give us just some stats. I will link a guide that has all of the things explained more in detail. Basically, you want to get all of the red ones so you can instantly get points. Another thing I get asked quite frequently is where are the best places to level? So in terms of right now, keep in mind things are subject to change. Things can get buffed and nerfed. So if you're new here, make sure you guys subscribe and I'll tell you guys all the updates to the best areas. The best areas right now, the people that are doing like the races. Okay, if you're playing on hardcore, do not do the PvP one. Okay, but the PvP area, the bottom one, okay, there's two PvP zones. There's one over here in Kyrgyzstan and there's another one over here near the dry steppes. These two areas are PvP zones. So just as a heads up, the bottom one is way better. I wouldn't even bother going to the top one unless like there's someone in the bottom one who's destroying you again and again. These PvP zones are actually quite good. Not for any of the red dust or any of the other currency that you can get, because if you get the red dust, you can exchange it for items and you can get legendaries off of this. But it's not done necessarily for that, but it's because the density and the amount of like elites are pretty good. Now, if you don't want to do PvP, you don't actually have to even do PvP as in kill other players. It's just this is the PvP zone. If there's someone that is just constantly killing you, then you can go to a different zone and you don't have to do this. This is by far the best thing to do. So there is a very specific dungeon called the Champions Demise. This is the exact method. If you want to see the guy that got rank 1 in terms of being able to get to level 100, Rob, he was doing this strategy and a lot of other content creators were doing this strategy as well. Now, just as a heads up, because this is a question I get all the time, what's the best XP method? How do I get to, higher level as fast as possible? The best answer is to actually play in a group. There's several different methods that you can do to even complete Renown. So getting the Lilith statues again, that's like really good. You can see I completed a bunch of them, saw my progression on doing the Renown. The reason why you want to do the Renown is because on the Renown, you will be able to gain all of these bonuses. So you'll see that you'll gain a skill point, you're going to get potion capacity, as well as max obols, which this one doesn't really matter, but you really want that 4 bonus Paragon points. And once you start going to the World Tier 3, then you want to do 1 or 2 Grim Favors. And the reason why you want to do it for the Tree of Whispers is this is exactly how you get the items to actually do the Nightmare Dungeons, which again, those are the sigils. That's not until World Tier 3 that you can do it. So once you're at World Tier 3, I would say you can do the Grim Favors. But Grim Favors also give you some recipes, so it can be valuable. Overall, all the forms of content pretty much for the endgame are required to do pretty much for the most part in terms of min-maxing. Like you're going to want to try to do all of them, but don't focus too much on Grim Favors. I would focus more on getting your Renown, because again, this is what's going to give you those Paragon points. You can see I'm still like on my progression to getting all of those Paragon points in all of the regions. So do this, do all of the strongholds. These ones will get your extra skill point faster. And then again, eventually you want to get your Paragon points as long as you have your mount, because the whole point of this video is endgame, so you'll have your mount ready to go. And then on top of that, the Helltide event doesn't happen until you reach World Tier 3. So you'll see some of these regions will be red, not the PvP ones, but they'll actually be in red. And so what a Helltide is a certain area that gets marked. So you'll see over here, you'll see it marked on the map. So again, you got to get to World Tier 3 before this even is able to be activated. That's why I always recommend guys to do the capstone. So what you do is you kill stuff and you get these things in the top right. You can see where it says Helltide duration. It only lasts for a set duration. And once it goes away, all of your cinders, which is a special currency that drops, they will all disappear. So like think of it like Chuck E. Cheese tokens, but they expire in 1 hour when the event is actually going on. So you want to spend them on specific chests. Now, which chest do you want to actually get? There is an actual chest that you want to actually get. So the important thing with this is that you want to look for this specific chest in the very beginning. Unless you're trying to target farm something, you'll see that there are these chests and you have to spend your cinders on these chests. So you can see over here, I'm going to open up this one. You want to look for the Tortured Gift and Mysteries. The reason why is it has the best drops, but it's hidden. It doesn't always show up. You can see all of these. Look at this. Every single one of these is World Tier 3. Every single one of these is sacred, which is the highest, like, in terms of stats. Eventually, once you get to World Tier 4, you will get Ancestral, which will then be the best. But there's 5 items right here. That is massive. And then eventually, you want to start rolling your pieces of gear. I'm going to make a dedicated video towards, like, how to min-max, how to make your character way, way, way stronger. You can make your character, like, legitimately, like, 10 times stronger just by going off of rolls. But the short TLDR is to basically look for things that your build can benefit off of. So in my build, I actually, in the very beginning of the game, don't even really care about rolls. The number, green arrow, equip, that's basically what you want to do. You don't want to really roll things And again, I'll make a dedicated like build guide for like your progression and later. But basically, you want to look for things that are like damage to enemies affected by a trap skill, extra main stat. In Rogue's case, it's dexterity, Barb case is strength. You want to look for core skill damage on most things, but it depends on what your build can actually do. Because if I get bonus damage to freeze, well, my build does not do freeze, so it's a worthless stat. You can reroll one thing on an item, but again, this whole video is going to be something I will drop, and it's really important that you guys watch that one because there's so much extra damage that you can get by just getting rolls. I mean, look at this. We have 56% extra vulnerable damage on top of all of those other bonuses. Sometimes this matters more than legendary powers. And then also trying to get like the correct aspects, you got to focus in on that. Another thing I want to mention, when you complete the game, one of the first things that you need to do if you don't have your legendary aspects all complete. So like I'm talking about, for example, like I like the one we can get some sort of heal, the one where basic skills grant damage reduction. You want to get all of these things. You get these by doing certain dungeons, and you will get these as permanent rewards. One that everyone keeps on asking, to get the twisting blades, the one that rotates, it's in Jalal's Vigil. Depending on the build that you play, there's probably 1 to 2 legendary powers that you want, and then all you do is you take it to the occultist and you just imprint it on whatever piece of gear that you want. And remember, it will always give you the lowest roll. Ideally, you extract the aspect and you craft on it, but I'll talk more about that in my like whole min-maxing guide video. But you want to do that, and I have a dedicated guide, and I will pin it down below also, that goes over the best powers that you can get from the dungeons. It's really easy, and you get them infinitely. All you need to do is do the dungeon one time, and you can infinitely, I'm going to go ahead and just show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. You could do this infinite times, and then eventually you will start getting these items as drops, and then you want to extract them as aspects, because if you extract them as aspects, the roll will be way better. You can see this one rolls up to 3,000. Actually, this is a very good example that I can show you, and it's very important. So if I was to get like these pair of pants, right, and I put in the Codex of Power, we have like the barrier one, right? You see where it says it grants me 1600 barrier? Well, if I craft the aspect on it, it's going to give me 3,000. Obviously, that's way better. The dungeons will give you the worst roll that you can possibly get. So you don't want to use the dungeon one if you happen to have an item that you can actually extract the power of. So like, let's say if I wanted to extract the power, this one was actually already crafted on it, but this one was crafted as well. But let's say this killing a vulnerable enemy, I really wanted this like power. I would go to extract the aspect, and I would extract the aspect, and then I would gain that power and put it on something else. That's the main thing that you want to focus in on once you reach endgame. So you want to make sure, 1, you get all of your powers. 2, you try to get to the capstone. Again, these can be like intertwined here. And then eventually to get to world tier 4 is your next goal. So eventually you're going to want to do tier 4, and it's like there's a special dungeon, and there's like an Uber Elias. This fight is really hard. If you're wondering when did I do mine, because this is a frequently asked question, it says you're supposed to be level 70. I did mine at 59. It is a very tough fight. I'm not gonna lie. It's probably there's another tough fight after. It's a really good boss fight though. I won't spoil it. Maybe we'll drop a video, but there's like an Uber Elias. It's really cool, and I think they should actually make more bosses like that. It's like one of the, I think there's only 2 bosses in the game so far that I would be like, okay, these are absolutely amazing. They should have just put these in the base game to make it much harder. There's also another secret boss here, but I will cover that in another video. But basically, that's what you want to do after you reach endgame. So to sum it up, basically, you want to get your renown, and then also like don't focus on just completing all these grim favors, because I know a lot of people are like, oh man, legendaries. Don't worry, all the legendaries you get will be pretty much worthless because they're not going to be what's called ancestral unless you're just looking at them and you're saving them. And this is another pro tip: save your legendaries that roll high. Like for example, this rolled perfect. You see how it says twisting blades can roll 20 to 30% increased damage, and then it goes to 40 to 60. This one is perfect. Okay, so even if this item was like terrible, like all the stats were terrible, I'm just going to extract that legendary aspect so I can put it on something else once I get my ancestral. Although this one's already ancestral, and it didn't roll with this. I got another item that I got through the campaign while I was leveling, and it rolled really well, and it was just like a regular legendary, right? I took that and I imprinted it on, and now I have like a super uber weapon. So anyways, that's going to be the ultimate guide for once you finish the campaign, these are the things that you do. So eventually you're going to do your renown, you'll get all these bonus Paragon points. But there's also another thing, actually really quick before I finish this off, the Paragon system and the glyphs. This is a very frequently asked question as well. So if I go to my Paragon, and again, you get this once you complete the ability to do, you complete the tier 2 and you get the capstone to do tier 3. You will start to get, once you do the Tree of Whispers, again, you get the sigils. Once you complete it, let me go actually open up this in a Nightmare Dungeon. At the very end of the Nightmare Dungeon, you get to upgrade your glyph. What is a glyph? If you play Diablo 3, it's basically a legendary gem. How do you get these glyphs? You just play the Nightmare Dungeons, they drop, they're super, super common. Don't worry about any build guide that tells you to get like this very specific one. These are super easy. Just roll enough to where you get the glyph. And then with this glyph, what you're able to do is actually increase the stats of it. So all of the numbers here, let me make this a little bit bigger and move my face out of the way. You can see in the gold, that number will change when you upgrade them. It's literally like completing a rift. So once you complete the nightmare dungeon, you'll be asked to allocate XP onto a glyph. And when you upgrade it, it's going to do more of whatever it does. So in my case right now, let me give you guys an example real quick. So on my Paragon board, I happen to have this thing socketed right here, right now. And this gives me extra damage. So I socketed this in, and if I do Nightmare Dungeons, I can start leveling up. You honestly don't get a very huge amount of DPS boost, but what I did want to get that bonus where it says, like, as long as I have 40 within the dexterity range, which is this red thing, when you put it in, it's going to socket it in. And eventually these can actually grow to be even larger, but this is what it will do. It will give you some sort of bonus. But the additional bonus to get damage reduction was kind of nice to have earlier on. I did this in World Tier 3. So if you want to do Nightmare Dungeons in World Tier 3, it's not that bad, but don't think that it's going to be super valuable because the XP that you get scales with the Nightmare Dungeons difficulty in terms of the tiers. So you can see this one says Tier 22 at the top. The difficulty scales with the amount of XP that you get. So the harder that you do these, more XP you get. Think of it like Diablo 3, like the higher greater rift, like the number, like if you're doing a GR 100, you're going to get way more XP. Although in Diablo 3, how it worked is it wouldn't even give you the level up. Now it gives you always some XP, but it might be a small amount if it's a very low tier dungeon. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up. I know there's so much information, but I mean, there's a lot of things to do in this game. So one other thing I want to mention, don't focus too much on Grim Favors. Legendaries aren't really that special. Focus on doing your Renown, and then also focus in on getting the Lilith statues so you can get more Paragon points at the end of the day. But if you see any events, right now, honestly, the events are kind of mediocre in terms of like what you're getting for loot. But I would say if there's a world boss, it's not that bad to do the world boss as part of like the, you know, there's some achievements for it, but you can do a world boss once in a while. It's not really that special, to be honest, to make sure that you always do a world boss, with the exception of it does give you the ability to add a socket to things. So if you already have a bunch of them, like I have like 15, I can add 15 sockets. I don't really need to do any more world bosses, and getting 1 to 2 legendaries is not super exciting to me. But like the world bosses, I mean, I legitimately cleared a world boss in 1 minute on the hardest difficulty, but it's not that bad to do the world bosses. But don't think that world bosses are like the ultimate, I gotta grind and do these. You can literally do other content and get better rewards as long as you have the sockets. Okay, that's the one important thing. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here, hit subscribe, turn the bell if you'd like to see more Diablo guides and content in the future, and I'll catch you in the next video. And check the comment for the videos that I mentioned.